As we shall see, the French Revolution, the fight for liberty, and the Haitian Revolution, which it arguably influenced, and the construction of the first in the history of human history, the first time in human history, the establishment of a democracy by previously enslaved people. After we see this, we see the other slave colonies fall like dominoes, which gives us the fight for the rest of the Americas. Information travelled very quickly in the 18th and 19th century. Ships were crossing the Atlantic Ocean and they carried news with them. During this period of time, we see an acceleration of slave revolts occurring in the Caribbean and the Americas. Now, revolts had always happened, but we start to see them becoming more frequent. In Jamaica, many of the runaway slaves were previous prisoners of tribal warfare. So these individuals who were prisoners of war were guerrilla fighters who had been bought by the British after they'd been imprisoned during tribal warfare. They were taken to the Caribbean as slaves from West Africa. Many of them ran to Blue Mountain to join the Maroons in Jamaica, a group of runaway slaves. Queen Nanny, born in modern-day Ghana, led the Maroons for a period of time. The Maroons would use guerrilla tactics to raid plantations, rescue slaves and recruit them into their forces. They later signed a treaty, the Maroons later signed a treaty with the British, but many argue as to whether or not they actually kept their peace treaty. However, in 1831, less than 30 years after the Haitian Revolution led by Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Samuel Sharpe, who was a preacher in Jamaica, had freedom to move around the island of Jamaica as he preached, and he met with a loyal following, and he used this loyal following to plan a revolt. At the end of a regular prayer meeting in mid-December in 1831, Samuel Sharpe and a selected group of leaders stayed behind to discuss the plans for an African slave revolt. Sharpe recalled examples from the Demerara Slave Revolt in 1823 in Guyana and rebellions on Caribbean islands to encourage his followers and motivate his followers to fight. He then had them swear on a Bible to the plan which he outlined. On Christmas Day, the leaders of the uprising went on strike, demanding more free time and a working wage. They refused to return to work until the plantation owners met their demands. The strike escalated into a full-on rebellion when the planters refused their demands. On Monday the 27th of December in 1831, the rebellion broke out of the Kensington estate, which is near Montego Bay. As sugarcane fields were set on fire, whites not already in town for Christmas fled to Montego Bay and other communities. 60,000 Africans, which was at the time 20% of the enslaved population, revolted. 1 in 5 Africans revolted. They killed 14 English slavers before being suppressed by gunfire, and over 200 rebels were killed. Samuel Sharpe was hung, and his last words were, "I would rather die upon yonder gallows than live in slavery." Another preacher, Nat Turner, in America, also led a rebellion against slavers, killing up to 65 people. Harriet Tubman, a runaway slave, helped to build a chain of secret stops and a line of communications called the Underground Railroad. She successfully rescued 70 enslaved Africans and countless more from the shackles of slavery in her service in the American Civil War. Support also simultaneously grew in Britain as a group of men called the Clapham Boys, featuring the likes of William Wilberforce, also campaigned for the abolition of slavery. During the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation to free enslaved Africans, although this was thought to be a military strategy to crush the Southern economy so that the North could gain an advantage. What I'm saying here is that although superficially it looks like Abraham Lincoln wanted to free the enslaved Africans, from an ethical perspective, it might have been to gain an economic advantage in warfare, because if he removes free labour from the South, he will crush their economy, and he therefore has a hold on them because they cannot then fund the manufacture of arms. The African Americans were recruited into the army, and many were given the nickname Buffalo Soldiers, possibly due to their afro hair. So this is where we get the term Buffalo Soldier from. It's where these enslaved Africans in the South of America, so African Americans in the South of America, fled to the northern lines on their side of the war, their side of the frontier, to fight from the north against the South. Abolitionists such as runaway slave Frederick Douglass travelled to Britain to perform on the speaker circuits. He would debate for the notion of the abolition of slavery against his opposing orators who argued to keep slavery. His obvious intelligence was put on stage for the audience to see. He became an example of African intellect, living evidence that Africans were just as able as any other people. Now, my task to you: Toussaint Louverture, Samuel Sharpe, Nat Turner, etc. all learned to read when to do so was a taboo and was illegal for people of African descent. Many of their rebellious predecessors and successors were also far more educated than their peers. Why do you think this is? Why do you think why do you think there is a correlation between education, enlightenment, and leadership, or these individuals being able to lead a people? Exploring the previous question, why do you think there was a drive to keep Africans uneducated? Another task which I would like you to explore: African Americans such as Frederick Douglass and James Baldwin travelled the world to debate opposing orators orator is a public speaker, who often held very racist ideologies. James Baldwin's debate against William F. Buckley became world famous. Debates required two people of opposing views to offer their views on stage. It became a great way for people to popularise racial equality. Speaker circuits and debates, however, differ from today's cancel culture. Do you think people of immoral views should be debated or silenced? Explain why. So what I'm asking here is, do you cancel someone who has an immoral or unethical view, or do you let them go head to head with an opposing ideology, or someone who represents very well the different side of the argument? Now, the reason why I'm asking this is cancel culture is, I suppose I would describe it as a strive for ethical purity, i.e. get out of the equation any unethical voices or opinions. But the problem is you can drive them underground, and they themselves can actually start to generate a following without control. So you get them out of there and they develop a following of their own. However, if these individuals, this is my argument, it might not be yours, but if these individuals were brought onto a world stage and went head to head with someone who is opposing their views from a very ethical, intellectual standpoint, you would then expose the flaws in their theory, and then the public can then decide as to whether or not to follow that individual or not. I want to understand what you think, so please feel free to discuss as a group under the teacher's guidance. And if you want to keep theme to the speaker circuits at the time, then feel free under your teacher's guidance to have a debate as to what you would rather prefer: speaker circuits or cancel culture.